So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. My name is Blair Peshyn. I work here at the Creative Technology Center, and we're happy to host this event today. This is actually a library event. We periodically do these events called Berklee Books, and so we're going to be talking a bit about this book today, written by this gentleman here, who I will introduce in a moment. And we have a copy of this book upstairs as well. So we'll get into it. Just a couple of things. We are video recording today, so I want to have like a dialogue with you guys. So if you have like questions or anything you want to add to the conversation, please throw your hand up and we'll get a wireless microphone to you. That'll make the production of the video that much better. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, so I'm really happy to sort of moderate this talk today with professor and author Prince Charles Alexander. He is a native of Boston. I have to check my notes because you have so many superlatives here, so excuse me. But he's a musician, songwriter, band leader, recording and mixing engineer, producer, winner of 3 Grammy Awards, 7 Grammy nominations, and over 40 platinum and gold certifications from the RIAA. That's kind of a lot. He's also a professor here, music production and engineering, and he created the minor in creative record production? Commercial. And that's essentially become sort of this new major that's being created.
Independent record production.
Independent record production. So really sort of shaping the courses and the material is taught here at Berklee. And as I mentioned, he is also now author of this book, Hip Hop Production Inside the Beats, which is available from Berklee Press. And we have a copy of it here in the library. So please, welcome Prince Charles Alexander. So, I don't think there's many books on hip-hop production in the world.
That's true. When I created a course here in MP&E called Hip Hop Production, and I was like, oh, let me go and look at some books. And most of the books were talking about fashion, language, things that were outside of, well, what's the technology? Like if you want to learn how to make a record in MP&E, you figure out where to put the microphones on the drums. But where are the books that actually explain to us the relationship of the drum machine, the synthesizer, the sampler to hip-hop? And I couldn't find many. Actually, I found 2. One of them is called Beat Tips Manual by Saeed out of Manhattan. Okay. And the other one is Making Beats by Joseph Schloss, and he is a musicologist out of, I think, UMass Lowell. And that was it. And I was like, okay, so wait a minute. I grew up and had to confront hip-hop and then figured out a way to get into hip-hop and thrive in hip-hop. And a lot of what I experienced wasn't displayed anywhere, wasn't something that I could read about, wasn't something that I could, create bullet points for a class. So I created the class, and then the class helped to inform me of what to put in that book. And I thought I was going to do it in 6 months, but it took me 13 years.
Well, then a lot has changed in that time as well.
Exactly.
A lot of technological advancements. So I guess what you're saying is there's a pretty wide body of like research into hip hop as a cultural phenomenon, but the actual like nitty gritty of producing the music, which is at the center of it, you're saying there's 2 books, one by like an academic and one by a practitioner?
A practitioner who's about 10 years my junior.
Yeah.
So even though he had an interesting perspective, it wasn't the perspective of seeing hip-hop born. When he came along, hip-hop was already here on the planet. Yeah. I remember hearing the first hip-hop record and going, what the heck is that craziness? And then having to confront that as a musician who was from Boston, who didn't go to Berklee, but always here hanging out with the musicians at Berklee, and listening to Rapper's Delight going, wait a minute, it's 3 guys talking on a record. They didn't make the record because it's actually an interpolation of a record that came out in August, and this is October. And so
And this
what?
is 78 or 79?
79, 1979.
Okay.
And I had actually put out my first album in that same year. So literally, I'm like putting out my record. Yeah, I'm gonna do the thing, and then all of a sudden, Rapper's Delight comes out, and it kind of sucks all the air out of the room. And I'm like, and I'm gonna do more music. And as I'm saying, I'm gonna do more music and become this musician and this. I was doing like funk, like Rick James, Prince. And I'm thinking as I'm gonna do more of that, you got Curtis Blow comes out with the breaks and Christmas rapping, and then you got one rapper after another, and Rakim, and all of them are coming out. And I'm like, okay. I'm over here in my spandex, on stage with feathers and wigs and all this kind of crazy stuff. And these other guys are coming out here in their jeans and, their members-only jackets. And they're delivering something that's connecting to audiences. And I remember it being, a moment that I had to really pause and consider, well, what am I actually doing with music? Am I trying to be the next John Coltrane? Or do I want to speak to the people that I've grown up with and have something that we can all like vibe on when we have the party, the cookout on the weekend? And I made the choice, and I remember saying to Tommy Campbell, great drummer Tommy Campbell, that I made the choice to go into commercial music, and in going into commercial music, funk was kind of like the dominant thing. If you were going to be like on the edge and you were kind of cool, the cool guy, in 1979, it was funk music.
Disco had really informed funk quite a bit by that point in time.
It was the other way around. Funk informed disco.
Funk informed disco.
Yeah, disco was kind of like the McDonald's of funk. If funk was the steak, disco was the McDonald's.
Okay.
It's like, hey, we can perform on the floor on anything and make it work, and basically it did. So that was kind of like the landscape that I was in, and when I heard Rapper's Delight, it was an anomaly. I thought it was a novelty record, kind of like Monster Mash. She did the mash, she did the Monster Mash. It was a graveyard smash, and it was like, it was a kind of silly record from the '60s and kind of come and go. Yeah. And I thought Rapper's Delight would come and go, and then here we are, 40 some odd years later, and hip hop is not only in the curriculum here at Berklee, but it's in the curriculum at many institutions across the country. I still don't think that people teach hip hop as a functional skill set. They teach it as a cultural acuity, something that you are either part of or learn to be part of. But like, what sample do you use to get your beat right? Do you use FL Studio as a DAW? Do you use Pro Tools as a DAW? Do you use Logic as a DAW? These are the conversations that I wasn't hearing or wasn't seeing in textbooks.
So, Rapper's Delight, how many of you know that track? I think maybe we should listen to a little bit.
Yeah, that would be great.
Because that was actually one of the things that kind of caught me from the book, because I always thought that was a sample. One of the things I learned from your book is that it's not a sample.
It's a live band.
So maybe we should dig into
that. It's actually a drummer, a bass player, a keyboard player, a guitar player, and there's a scratch sample that's flown into it.
So let me pull this up.
Well, it wasn't a sample. It was actually a scratch from a turntable that was played into the record.
So, Rapper's Delight, Sugar Hill Gang, 1979. Here we go.
First of all, that sounds, no, you can let it play. It sounds really raggedy to me. Let it play, let it play.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It sounds really raggedy to me. Those congas don't sound in time to me. I know conga
And this
players.
sounds like a sample too, like one of those like...
All live.
Yeah.
All live. We didn't have music sequencers then. We didn't have samplers then.
So what song do you think this is?
Yeah, it's Good Times by Chic.
Yeah, yeah.
Nile Rodgers.
But it's not.
So the context is, if you're a DJ in 1979 or 78 or 77 or 76, you're playing the hits of the time.
Yeah.
So there's a hit record, boom, pull it down, play it on the dance floor, everybody's vibing.
Yeah.
So in August, Good Times comes out. Good Times is the record of the time, right? So if you're a rapper in 1979, you're gonna rap to the breaks in Good Times.
Yeah.
So Sylvia Robinson, the record executive from Sugar Hill Records, came up with the idea, hey, let's take that record and actually exploit it as hip-hop as a recorded product, not as a live product. And they ran into copyright law, and the way to get around copyright law was to have a band
re-recording.
replay it.
Yeah. So since we are talking about the sample, Here's the sample tune we're talking about, and we'll go back to.
So you hear that pulsy boom, boom,
Yeah.
bum, 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 bum,
Yeah.
bum. So that is a Dorian,
Yeah.
minor scale.
Yeah.
Um,
Now Rogers, like you said.
Now Rogers, the same guy that played on the Daft Punk records
Right.
from a few
Get
years
Lucky.
ago. Yeah, and it's.
Same guitar style.
I thought it was a sample. Well,
Yeah.
not a sample. I thought they had the original master.
Yeah.
And had sung or rapped on the original master.
Yeah.
I was very confused.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was listening to when I heard Rap is the Light.
So let's listen a little more of it, and let's listen to the rap style.
Yeah.
Because it really informed kind of everything that came after that. Let's skip forward.
So I can see the Knicks play basketball.
Go back it up.
Because
Because everybody has to. Yeah, go back a little bit more. Everybody knows this part, right? 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. I said the hip hop, the hip it, the hip it, the hip hop, you don't stop, rock to the bang bang. We say up jump the boogie to the rhythm of the boogity beat. Now what you hear is not a test, I'm rapping to the beat. And me, my crew, and my crew are gonna try to move your feet. See, I am Wonder Mike, and I'm here to say hello to the black, to the white, the red, and the purple, and yellow. But first, they gotta bang, bang, the boogie to the boogie, say up, jump, the boogie to the bang, which is actually a rip-off of another song.
Yeah.
That'll make your body hot.
Yeah.
Now remember, I didn't even like that song. That's how powerful it became in our culture and in music.
Yeah.
That me, somebody that was a saxophone player playing funk, having come from jazz roots and R&B roots, years later would adopt and understand the vitality and the necessity of being able to make a connection to that composition.
So let's talk about copyright a little bit, because so as I mentioned in the book, there's a whole chapter on what you call the live band model of hip hop production, and I think there's like a theme throughout the history of hip hop and production, and in particular the production of the music, where like the people who are creating the music are making do with what they have at hand, right?
Yeah.
And so not a lot of people had the opportunity to go into the studio and record with the band. So people started trying to find other ways to make a record.
So, yeah, it's really funny, the merger of technology and creativity, and it's been an ongoing thing. You know, you'd be surprised once I started doing my research how vilified the piano was. You know, why are you going to strike strings with a hammer? That doesn't make any sense.
You're talking about like in the 19th century or
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. You know, when the piano comes along, it's like, what is this? Why are you going to, be hitting strings with this device? So much of our technology, as it unfolds, creativity kind of looks at it and says, well, what can I do with it? So the drum machines, the programmable drum machines actually were released in 1980. The first one was the Lin LM1. And the other one was the Roland TR-808. Those two drum machines presented something that was really, really unique to our creativity, which was the metronomic precision of time division. Because normally, you hear a metronome and the drummer plays against the metronome, and if they speed up or they slow down, it's all good, but the record sounds great.
Yeah.
Like I've listened to Roxanne by
Police?
The Police,
Yeah.
and it starts at 129 beats per minute. By the time the song is over, it's at 137 beats per minute. But it feels good. Everybody likes the record.
Feels real.
But then once you get into this metronomic subdivision, then everything starts to really follow the 60,000 milliseconds in a minute. You subdivide that by tempo, you can actually come out to the number of milliseconds in the duration of a
Right.
single quarter note. By the way, that math is in the book.
It is.
So at 120 beats per minute, 500 milliseconds is one quarter note. And if you can understand that, then the next 500 seconds is another quarter note, and so forth and so on. So that very metronomic precision it took a few years, and then the live band model starts to move over to a more cost-effective way to have a rapper sitting on a beat. So imagine this: you're a rapper, you want to make a song, and Curtis Blow has his song, and he's got a whole band, and the rappers, the guys from that song "Rappers Delight," Sugar Hill Gang,
yeah.
have a full band.
Yeah.
And then you want to make a record, so you call up a band, and the keyboard player walks in, and they've got a keyboard, right? They've got a synthesizer, and they've got this other square thing with some little pads on it. And you're the rapper, and you walk over, the guitar player's warming up, and the bass player's warming up, and the drummer's warming up, and you go over to the keyboard player, and you say, "What's that thing?" They say, "A drum machine." "What do you do with it?" "I make beats." "What do you mean make beats? We got a drummer, we got a bass player. What do you mean make beats?" Boom. Hits play. Here's the beat. I'm like, oh, I don't have to pay 5 people.
Mm-hmm.
I can pay 1 person. Keyboard player's got bass on his left hand, chords on his right hand, and the drum machine.
You're done.
It was over. It was done. A much more cost-effective return on the investment for the rapper, for the record company. Literally changed the game for our entire industry, and that's where we are now. And it's all led all the way up to our independent record production major, where 1 person can sit at a DAW and make orchestrations.
So what I think is kind of, so this is, I guess, one of the early ads for the Lindrum, the LM1 you were talking about. Real drums. It was all about real drum sounds.
Which they were. They were samples of real drums. They were.
You had 100 drum beats.
Wow. How
Yeah.
cool is that?
All drums tunable in pitch.
Yeah, yeah.
So the Lindrum was I guess, the first one you said, essentially?
So programmability was something that drum machines didn't have before. So drum machines were really rhythm machines. Like if you think about an organ, old organs used to have these little rhythm boxes on them.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And
So like you have like a cocktail party. And
yeah,
you're
it would be like samba beat.
Yeah, and you play a little thing on it.
You know, things like that.
Yeah.
And that eventually became Ikatoro Kakahashi from Roland and Dave Smith from
Sequential.
Sequential Circuits.
Yeah.
We're both curious about what could be done if the programming of those sounds was given to the actual user. And so the result of that was his Lin LM1 and Roland's TR-808.
We also got.
And you can see the
Right on
musical
cue.
subdivisions that are going on there in this composition. And these are like 16th notes. You could also redistribute them to be a triplet by using just those 12. So that would be a triplet, and that would be a
with this little
16th note.
pre-scale thing, right?
Yeah, then you could look at the scale so that when you actually selected the note, this is called a step sequencer. And a step sequencer basically has 16th notes. And so you could put one there, put one on 1, one on 5, one on 9, and one right here on 13. It would be boom, 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 boom. So you'd have 4 on the floor. And then you could put a hi-hat on all of them, and the boom, boom, boom. So you just select your instrument, and then select the pattern for the instrument, and then you're off and running.
And no swing, right?
No, it did have swing.
Was that the fine adjust?
Fine adjust. There's a swing button on there somewhere. And what the swing was doing was shifting the subdivisions of the 16th notes. I think that fine adjust might be it.
Maybe that pushes it a little bit.
But it was shifting the fine adjustment of the 2nd and 4th 16th notes. So da 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 da. There was a delay unit in there that would grab the 2nd and the 4th 16th note and then push them
Just
back.
delayed them a little bit.
So 50% swing is the da 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 da. And when you go to 66% swing, it's da 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 triplets. And you could dial it in anywhere in between that 50 and 66%. So it was like really, really fascinating. And it really, I didn't know that that's what was going on in drum machines then. I've since, been doing my studying and realized that that's what's going on. And I think Dave Smith, Roger Lynn. Roger Lynn was, I think, 22 years old when he invented the Lynn drum.
Okay.
Because he's relatively young. I think he's about 71 right now, 71, 72.
Yeah. So speaking of, I didn't talk to him before I made the slideshow, but so this is, I find this really fascinating. So this is Roger Lynn, who came here for a little clinic. He has a MIDI controller that he makes called the Linstrument,
Yeah.
which is really cool. We
It's
have one in
great.
the CTC.
Yeah, I love it.
So he came here and I met him. He's like the nicest person you'll
Yeah.
ever meet.
Yeah.
But so I find him to be a really fascinating person because one of the first programmable drum machines, and then he also made this box, right?
The MPC.
The MPC, and so with the drum machines, the drum machines that we looked at, these didn't have MIDI at this point, I don't think. Is that
No, they're
correct?
step sequencers. So what you would do is you would print the beat to tape, to 2-inch tape,
Yeah.
and then you would play the bass or play the synthesizer on top of them.
Yeah.
So one of the thought ideas that Roger Lynn had, that Dave Smith had, that Ikaturo Kakahashi had was, how can we merge the synthesizer, the drum machine, and whatever else we want to put in there, so that the composer doesn't have to rely on moving things over and then coming back and
Right.
overdubbing. And the result was the Akai MPC, which I think the first one comes out around 1984.
Sounds about right. It's probably this
no,
one. This
no,
is
no,
the
actually it's
15.
later. Now I think about it, because sampling was 87. So the first sampler was the S900. So this is about 1987.
Okay.
So it's an integrated sampler, controller. MIDI had been invented in 1983. So what MIDI did was say, I am sending information to a synthesizer. So this is middle C, and my synthesizer will play middle C. This is E, and my synthesizer will play E. So we can have the MIDI communication. But I can only communicate to that. I can't communicate to my drum machine also. So what they did was they tried to make a protocol,
Yeah.
and that protocol was MIDI. And MIDI then gave us the music sequencer. And there was one, I think it was the SQ700, which was a MSQ700 by, I think it was Roland, that could have my controller information go into the sequencer, then that distributed to the drum machine, so the drum machine would play. It would just play, it wouldn't control it. It would just tell it, start, stop.
At the right time.
Yeah.
In the right tempo.
In the right tempo,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
exactly, and start and stop in the right place. And then it would also, you could also marry some controller information to other synthesizers. So that was cool.
I mean, like before MIDI, none of this stuff talked to each other, right?
Yeah, you had to print it and then go back and overdub and print and overdub and so forth and so on.
And if you were like a synth person, you could maybe use control voltage to like synchronize things to an extent.
Yeah,
But-
so each one of the companies was trying to figure out how to use control voltage information to lock the step sequencer and the synthesizer together. So Sequential Circuits was doing it, Roland was doing it, and they were all like kind of in-house.
Yeah.
And then MIDI comes along and says, hey, everybody, we can make this universal for all of us. It's the most democratic thing I've ever seen happen in America. I swear to God. And everybody adopted it right away,
Yeah.
and they've been using it ever since.
Sure.
I've never seen anything that democratic in our culture.
And we were on MIDI 1.0,
In 1983.
and we're now on MIDI 2.0 as of I think 1 year ago.
1 year ago.
Something like that.
And honestly, nobody's even using it. Nobody even knows what it
Yeah,
does.
we're using a little bit like some of the MPE stuff.
Yeah.
MIDI polyphonic expressions, like the Rolly keyboard controllers.
Right. That's taking advantage
That's
of it.
part of the new MIDI 2.0. But yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. We're just
We're
it-
just
it is-
scratching the surface.
It is
of-
backwards compatible.
And what's great is that means that it was done really well. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
The subdividing not just notation, but subdividing notation to smaller grains, and then subdividing performance information, like how hard you strike something, how
Right.
long you hold something,
Right.
whether the polyphony will happen with one key or with all the keys simultaneously, whether you could introduce modulation into a sound, whether you could change the envelope slope over real time. All these things happened in version 1.0.
Change patches from across the
Change,
stage.
right,
you know,
right,
program
which was
changes.
really helpful in live.
for
you know,
live performance.
For a full concert where one keyboard is now the string patch and the piano patch and the organ patch and all that, and you can actually change them. Or you could have your roadie changing them for you, so you didn't even have to focus on it.
Yeah.
All of that stuff came about because of MIDI.
Yeah. So if you're ever wondering why you're editing in Logic and you're moving velocity and it only goes to 127, it's because of the MIDI specification. That was as much resolution as they could pack in with what they had available at the time.
Yeah, because MIDI is only an 8-bit word.
Right.
And if you look at the 8 bits, that's where am I? If you look at the 8 bits, that's 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128.
Right. Yeah.
Everything from 128 and above is a status byte.
Right.
And those things from 127 and below are data bytes. So if I say I am velocity, the only amount of velocity I can have is 127. But once I flip over and have 1 as my most significant bit, I am now velocity, or I'm control change, or I'm note on, or I'm note off, or something like that. Yeah. So there's a differentiation between what status is and what data is. And, you know, I don't know that people would think from the title of that book, Hip Hop Production Inside the Beats, that they would have such a comprehensive view of the guts of these languages. And that's, to me, what was missing. Because as a musician, I want to know notes. And I want to know that the saxophone can play, you know, this range 2.5 octaves or something like that. So as a technologist who is also a musician, I wanted to know, well, where are the notes in hip hop? Right. Because this note can be C1, but it can also be C3, but it can also be G2. The note is irrelevant. Right. What's really relevant is the performance data and how we're designated it in MIDI. And you can literally go into a MIDI instrument and tell any pad to be any note you want it to be. So the MPC that was on the screen is actually the bridge to us getting to the DAW.
One of the things I like that you talked about is you talked about like the swing in the MPC in the book. And I just, for all you Ableton cats, I just want to pull this up. If you know about groove pools, in Ableton you have groove pools. You talk about this in Logic, but it made me think about Ableton. So in Ableton, you can put grooves onto your beats. And there's a whole selection of grooves that have been extracted from live drums, like the placement of the hits, kick, snare, hi-hat. But they still have all of this MPC quantization. Yeah. Because it has a certain feel.
And you see that stuff that says A, B, C, D, so
yeah, right, yeah.
So really simply, and yeah, I'm going to geek out for a second. So this is one quarter note. Bar 1, beat 1, sub beat 0, 0, 0. This is another quarter note. Bar 1, beat 2, sub beat 0, 0, 0. In between, there's a bunch of increments that I can chop it up. So to be a MIDI device, there have to be at least 24 increments from here to here. From beat 1 to beat 2, there have to be 24 increments. So that would mean that the upbeat would be 12.
Right.
So 0, 12, yeah. 0, 12, yeah. 0, 12. Now if we do 16th notes, it would be 0, 0, 6, 12, 18, 0, 6, 12, 18, 0, 6, 12, 18,
straight 16ths.
Straight 16ths. Yeah. When you start swinging, B swing would be, actually, let me get back into the world of where we are in Pro Tools. So if 24 is the minimum amount that you need for MIDI, we've actually expanded in Pro Tools and Logic and multiplied that number by 40. So now there's 960 increments from here to here. So it's 0, 240, 480, 720, 0, 240, 480, 720, 0, 240, 480, 720. And what happens is if you swing the second 16th note and the fourth 16th note and add 20 increments, it's now 0, 260, 480, 740. That's called B swing. C swing is where you add 40 more, so it's 0, 280, 480, 760. So now it's getting later. By the time you get to adding 80, so there's A, B, so B is adding 20, C is adding 40, D is adding 60, E is adding 80. What's the subdivision of 240 by 3? 80.
Straight triplets.
And the funny thing about all of these swings, MIDI can only live on one of those 960 places in a 960 pulse per quarter note sequencer. In a 480 pulse per quarter note sequencer, like the ones that we use in the lab, the Phantom. The Phantom has a different MIDI resolution of 480.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so now it's 0, 120, 240, 360, 0.
So it feels a little different.
it feels it different. And then the MPC was 96 pulses.
Yeah.
So now it's 0, 24, 48,
Right.
72. So when you put all three of those instruments together and they're all trying to read the same clock, what your sequencer is doing is trying to resolve them, just like quantization, trying to resolve them to those nearest points in whatever the device's pulse per quarter note resolution
Right.
is. And that type of math and just trying to understand all that, to me, was like going in and looking at, flat fives and sharp sevens and harmonic resolutions and
Sure.
leading tones, which was the language that I wasn't seeing being written in books.
And I would see those, like, I would see this stuff. I'd be like, MPC swing. Like, what is that?
What is that?
Like, what you want to groove like a drum machine?
Yeah, yeah.
But like, your book kind of helped make it click for me because it's like, it's a very specific feel, and if you make a certain type of music, you want to tap into that feel.
Right.
To get that authenticity.
Exactly. And so this lineage, this journey from the Lin LM1, and exponentially the 1 second samples in the Lin LM1 go to 2 seconds, 4 seconds, 8 seconds, 16 seconds. So it is a sampler, but it's a ROM player. It's a read-only memory player.
Yeah.
And RAM is what a true sampler is, where you can actually pull your own thing into the sampler. So eventually by 1987, DigiDesign was involved in this too, because DigiDesign pops up in 1984 as DigiDrums.
Do you guys know what company DigiDesign became? Does anyone know? Nope. DigiDesign became Avid.
Well, it was actually Avid absorbed DigiDesign.
They made a film product.
Yeah,
media,
they were
composer. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they were flirting with Pro Tools and DigiDesign products, and then they just did a takeover.
Yeah.
And fired everybody.
Well, Apple did the same thing with Logic.
Right,
Apple
correct.
was made by a German company called eMagic,
eMagic.
and they bought them.
Yeah, creator notator.
If
back
you
in
go
the
work
day.
for Apple, this was actually a Berklee grad who worked for Apple for a little while. The same German guy who founded eMagic in the 90s is still like the CEO of Logic at Apple.
And there's a lot of numbers that I used to see in Logic. And I'm like, what does that number actually mean? And now I understand it
Yeah.
because I've done all this investigating. And it makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah.
But the Lin LM1 is directly responsible for us getting to samplers.
Right.
And samplers are directly responsible for getting us to the MPC. And,
Right.
and the MPC is directly responsible for getting us to the DAW.
So let's listen to some music. And since you're talking about samples, I thought maybe we should listen to one of 3 potential tracks. I'll let you pick. One More Chance, or Juicy, or I'll Be Missing You. Which one of those would you like to play?
Try I'll Be Missing You.
Okay, let me pull that up. So you worked on this track, right?
Yeah.
This is, okay, so we're gonna play I'll Be Missing You as soon as I can find it in my list of tracks here. Okay, there we go.
The reason I'm playing is because I want to see if everybody has an idea of what song this came from. I love that commercial. There's a new commercial.
Goes out to everyone that has lost someone that they truly love. Check it out. Seems like yesterday we used to rock the show. I laced the track, you locked the flow. So far from hanging on the block for dough. Notorious, they got to know that life ain't always what it seemed to be. Words can't express what you mean to me. Even though you're gone, we still a team. Through your family, I'll fulfill your dreams. In the future, can't wait to see if you open up the gates for me. Reminisce sometime. The night they took my friend. Try to black it out, but it plays again. When it's real, feeling's hard to conceal. Can't imagine all the pain I feel. Give anything to hear half your breath. I know you're still living your life after death.
Every move I make, every single day, every time I pray, I'll be missing you. Thinking of the day when you went away. What a life to take, what a bond to break, I'll be missing you.
That's funny to me.
This record was so huge, man.
Yeah.
I remember this. It's like such a trip for me to be talking to you, knowing that you worked on that. Do you guys know this tune?
You know the original song? Every Breath You Take, right?
Should we
Isn't
hear
it?
a little bit of that
Yeah,
too?
sure.
Should we play the original? So I got that queued up also.
So I hear an anomaly in there that no one else can hear. The snares are flamming. Not all the snares. Some of the snares are tight and some of the snares are flamming, and I can explain to you why in a sec.
All right. So this is the Police. Every Breath You Take. Andy Summers on guitar. Stuart Copeland. Sting.
7, 2, 3, 4, 8. That was really important what I just did. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In the 8th bar, Sting enters. It's really important. So the reason that I said that was important is because, first of all, it's a real drummer, and he's gradually speeding up and slowing down. So we got an 8-bar phrase, and if you listen to the record, I'll Be Missing You, it's an 8-bar phrase. So if you take the 8-bar phrase, you'll have this fluctuating tempo, and you'll try to figure out how to fit yourself on top of it and marry it to a static sequence. I don't remember what the tempos are, but let's say the tempo is 97-ish, right? And so maybe the tempo across those 8 bars is going to get an average tempo. The average tempo might be 97.6, but then we're working in 97. So we have the choice to go to 97.6. But in bar 2, he sped up to 98.3. In bar 3, he slowed down to 96.2. And so it's like, whoa, the snares would be like doing this all over the place.
Right.
So there's a couple of ways to mitigate that. One is to chop it up into 2 4-bar phrases. Now we can make this 4-bar phrase tight and that 4-bar phrase tight. But it still might not be tight enough. Chop it up into two bar
When you're
phrases.
saying chopping, are you on tape at this point? Are you in the computer?
No, we're in a sampler.
You're in a sampler.
So we've
You're-
sampled
Okay.
the whole song.
Okay.
We found an 8-bar phrase, and now that 8-bar phrase is playing on note C. So now we'll subdivide it, we'll chop it, and we'll put this other piece on note C sharp. So now we C, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, C sharp. We'll play the other half, right? And then that's not enough. We'll chop it again. So now it's C for 2 bars, C sharp for 2 bars, D for 2 bars, D sharp for 2 bars. That's still not enough. We'll go to 1-bar phrases, and we'll go C, C sharp, D. That's still not tight enough. You could chop it down to the quarter note. 1, bondo, dingo, 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 donk, dingo, dingo, donk. And then once you have it chopped up in your sampler like that, you can play it at any tempo.
It's a little different feel.
Well, actually,
So when you say C sharp, you mean like put it on this pad, put
C,
it on
C
that
sharp,
pad?
D, D sharp, E, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C sharp, D,
So just keep chopping.
and just keep chopping.
And then you got 2 bars on those 16
right.
pads.
So that's what people like Pete Rock used to do that.
Yeah.
And that led us to the conversation of elastic audio. That's how DAW started to use elastic audio, because we knew that we could chop audio and move audio closer or further away. But if we moved it further away, we had holes.
Gaps.
And gaps.
Yeah.
So what you do, elastic audio does the same thing, but it fills in the gaps with perceptually coded information. So if I'm going to go to, this is my tempo and I do this, we'll fill it with replicants of like bum, boom, bing, gong, ging, gong, gang, gong, will be gong, 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 ging, gong, gong, ging, ging, gong, 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 gong. And I know this because I do this all the time in my class. I slow things down to like ridiculously slow tempos to see what's actually going on, and you can hear the
Granular synthesis, right?
which relates totally to the concept of granular synthesis.
Yeah.
And this is the stuff that no one was talking about in hip hop, and it's like, I wouldn't have even known or understood how this came about if I hadn't had a relationship with hip hop.
Right.
Because I wasn't going on those type of explorations in rock, jazz, folk, blues. None of them were pushing me to find out what was going on inside the beats the way that hip hop was.
Should we listen to that for one more time so you can see if you can hear that little flame he's talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah. I'll show you where it is.
Let's play that.
And the reason that it's flamming, one second, stop. The reason that it's flamming is because we're playing other instruments on top of the sample.
That has lost someone that they truly love. Check it out. Seems like yesterday we
That's,
used to rock
that
the
last
show.
one's flam.
I
That's
laid the
flam.
track, you locked the flow. So far from hanging on the
That's
top of
flam.
the dough.
That tight.
Notorious, they
Tight.
got to know that.
Flam.
Life ain't always what it seemed to be. Words can't express what you mean to me. Even though you're gone, we still a team.
Flam, flam.
Yeah, it almost sounds like a delay almost,
Yeah, it's
right? Like
you,
stacca,
you can hear
stacca.
you can hear that.
You can hear it in the guitar too.
There's like 2 of them that are tight. The rest of them are kind of whack.
I always thought there was like a little. I always thought there was like a little bit delay on the guitar because
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
always listening to the guitar
So
part.
what happened at Bad Boy, we got to the point where we were so good at replicating, just very similar to the Rapper's Delight song. We were so good at replicating that we would replay the information in the song, and then that gave us the ability to take the sample out, put the sample in, take our replay out, have the sample hidden that was hidden unveiled, and we'll do it in things like there was a song called "The Warning," which was based on a 1-bar loop from a song that lasted for about 7 minutes by Isaac Hayes called "Walk On By." So this boom, ta, do, 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 doom, ka, that was it, and we made a whole song from that. And in the middle of the song, when Puffy sounds like he's on the radio, I'm about to hold the shares on the right. There's like we take all of the replay out and just have the sample, and we filter the sample, and you can actually hear where we got the song from, and that's a production.
It's
kind
like a
of-
little signature sort of.
So
People know what's
exactly,
going
a
on.
signature in the song where it's like, hey, wink, wink, we got this from Isaac Hayes.
Nice.
You know, and that's part of the conversation that happens in production in hip hop, where producers are actually talking to other producers and saying, hey, look what I just did. Hey, look what I just did. But how would you know if you don't know the language?
Yeah.
And so what I wanted to do was make sure that the language was unfolded for audiences so they could really see where the play was, where the good note choices, the good chords that we do in music. Well, where are those things in hip hop?
Yeah.
And a lot of them are in the way that information comes together in the music sequencer and the way that samples are used in the music sequencer.
Yeah. So speaking of, technology and understanding how it influences the music, we're tight on time. So when I hear hip hop tracks at this juncture, there's like kind of a couple. Well, there's like a hybridization, I think, right? Everything that's come before has been kind of merged together. Sampling and
Yeah.
808s are super ubiquitous, right?
yeah,
The 808 has become like a defining part of the sound. And 2 other things that I hear very prevalent are the triplet feel, like particularly like hi-hats, like from
And stutters.
trap,
Yeah,
I guess,
That comes from trap.
and auto-tune. I feel like hip hop has really embraced auto-tune as like a creative tool in a way that is different, I think, than other.
No other genre
Yeah.
kind of gravitated toward it like that.
Do you want to talk about either of those for a second?
Yeah, so very quickly, if I can do that subdivision and break up a sample and then redistribute it in time, one of the things that is the result of that is on analog tape, when you slow something down or speed something up, the pitch changes. But when you subdivide it and spread it out, the pitch doesn't change. So now you've got audio that can be slower or faster with the same pitch. So the thought experiment is, well, if I can change the time without changing the pitch, can I change the pitch without changing the time? Can I keep the time here but literally go up and down the scale? And then subdivisions of the tempered scale are an octave. So from here, if this is A440, that's A880, A440, A220. And those subdivisions are actually done with an exponential function math, which is the 12th root of 2. I'm sorry that I'm geeking out, everybody.
It's scary math.
But the 12th
That's
root of
it's
2.
in the book too, right?
Right, yeah. Because the 12th root of 2 is a number that when you multiply it by itself 12 times, it equals 2.
Right.
And that number is 1.059463009. I told you I was going to geek out. So, but these subdivisions, and I've actually talked to Peter Neubacher that invented Melodyne, and Ray
Oh, okay.
Williams, who's currently the distributor and really, really understands it. And I was like, so if I can chop audio and redistribute it and keep the pitch, am I chopping audio and changing the slope as I go up and down? He's like, no, that's not how we do it. I was like, oh, now you're just blowing my mind. He said, first of all, we have to just drop the idea of time, which makes my mind explode. So what they're doing is it's like an AI model. It's an artificial intelligence model where it looks at the waveform and the complexity of the waveform and then imagines it going up the scale and what it would look like
Sort
and
of
what it would sound like.
resynthesizes
It's like
it.
resynthesizing it. That's kind of a bullet point way that I could explain what's going on with Melodyne.
Yeah.
And then, Autotune is doing something similar, and Little Alta Boy is doing something similar in real time. Flex Pitch and Logic is doing something similar also. So the idea behind it, though, is to keep the same timing and duration, but alter the pitch. Now, as you're altering the pitch, there's another concept in there called the formant. The formant is but the fundamental is da. The next harmonic is da, right? The octave. And then so let's say I'll start with some easy math. 110 is my formant. The next octave is 220. If I multiply that by 3, I get 330. 330, if 110 is an A, 330 is actually an E. So the third harmonic is the fifth. The fourth harmonic is the second octave. So 110, 220, 440, right? The next harmonic is actually 550. And 554 is C sharp. So literally the first 5 harmonics of A would be A, E, A, C sharp. These,
Which is an A major triad.
right, which is an A major triad. Yeah. All these upper harmonics are the formant. They're the resonant frequencies that are giving the thing the tone that it has. If I can take them and break them away from the fundamental, I can do things like, I can make my voice sound like that. I can make my voice sound like that. So the idea of moving the formant around was something that I heard on a Luna George DJ Snake track, where I was driving one day and the voice went, yes, 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 yes. And I was like, wait a minute, the pitch is not changing. The time is not changing, but the formant is shifting. That freaked me out. And I was like, whoa. And we're hearing it in records. Now it's kind of normative. But
It's done to like percussion and stuff too.
you can do so many cool things with it. But it's really funny because I've seen these things when they first arrived creatively, and the people that were using them creatively, and now they're normative.
Yeah.
And so the journey of the book takes me on this idea that whatever we think hip-hop is, it continues to evolve and continues to move forward and continues to become other things. And one of those things, since we're short on time and I really want to play this song, is the Nigerian singer Thames
Oh yeah, sure.
has a composition that she sung live. And if you go in and listen to it, there's no really drums or transient energy. But there is a guitar going and playing arpeggios. So I went in and I tempo mapped where the guitar was and find out, and so that I can make my DAW go click, 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 click with the guitar. And then I can make it go to one tempo using elastic audio because of the cool features of elastic audio. And then I can actually drop the pitch using a little Alta Boy or using the elastic properties in the digital audio workstation and do that song, which is almost the same as doing I'll Be Missing You, which is the same as doing Jack Harlow's First Class, which is a remake of Fergie's Glamorous, which is the same as doing Nicki Minaj's Super Freaky Girl, which is Rick James's Super Freak. It's the same skill set, looking like other compositions, but it's really a skill set that one needs to master if one wants to play around in that field.
So let's listen to Higher by Thames.
This is the original song. So you would find these points. put drums to this. The original one doesn't have drums.
Oh, really?
Tell me why you're crying, how can it be you? When you gave me something I don't really feel, but you knew that already. When I found you on the ground, you were dying. Now you come into my yard uninvited. Can't you see me on the edge? I'm enlightened. If the world was ending, would you cry or would you try to get me? Tell me now about what you do.
Such a nice feel.
So the original one is her. The one that was sampled was her just performing live without those drums, and I had to go in and find the guitars, and I guess whoever did it originally had to go in and find those little transient points and line them up. So now I'll play Future's version.
With Drake on it too, right?
Yeah, and you'll hear that it's not the same pitch and it's not the same speed, but the ability to line it up was no different than the subdivisions of the subdivisions of the subdivisions thing.
Early in the morning, late at night. It don't even matter what time it is. Presidential, roll it, RM, wait. Whenever I found time, it's okay.
ATL Jacob, ATL Jacob.
You pray for my demons, girl, I got you. Every time I sip on codeine, I get vulnerable. Annoying the sounds of the storm when it comes. She understand I can't take her everywhere a nigga going. I've been in the field like the children of the corn. I can hear your tears when they drop over the phone. Get mad at yourself cause you can't leave me alone. Gossip and messy, it ain't what we doing. Traveling around the world, over the phone dropping tears. I get more vulnerable when I do pills. When you drunk, you tell me exactly how you feel.
And I would also say that adding another bit of the innovation that hip hop has brought to us is to have one vocalist performing on top of the top line of another vocalist.
Yeah.
So Thames is actually
Yeah.
singing
Yeah.
while the guy is performing, and that's a complex thing to have to digest as a listener.
Yeah.
And Kanye did that, you know, with Jamie Foxx mimicking Ray Charles. And once again, hip hop is pushing the parameters of how we hear the
I'll Be
voice, how
Missing
we hear
You
the
is
instruments.
kind of doing a similar thing.
Yeah,
you know, like
exactly.
You got your rapper, and then you pull in the R&B,
Yeah.
and then now it's a very common pop thing too, right? You've got the pop singer, but then you got the rapper as the contrast to the pop
Exactly,
singer.
exactly. And it leads us to things like Imagine Dragons with Jid. I mean, have you guys heard that song? What's the name of the song? Not Electric. What is it called? Enemy. Yeah. Enemy. Jid's performance is crazy on Enemy. Really, really crazy. And the other thing I like about hip hop, for me, is that it keeps me dusting off my skill set. I can't rely on the fact that, oh, I know how to sequence and logic, so I'm good.
Yeah.
You know, I keep having to investigate FL Studio and Ableton and
Yeah.
look at these new tricks, because every time I hear another song, I'm like, okay, can I do that? Yes. Can I do that? Yes. Can I do that? Yes. Can I do that? What was that?
Or some like major technical thing happens, like Melodyne used to be monophonic only, right?
Right.
And then Melodyne became polyphonic, and you could take a major chord and make it a minor chord.
Yeah.
That's insane.
It is. It's truly
Like, how do you
insane.
turn that inside
It's
out to
truly
be able to
insane.
get that note in the middle
Yeah.
and move just that note up or down, but not everything else?
I've done it. I've had to do it.
Yeah.
I've made some minor things major and some major things minor already.
But like that's a new tool.
Yeah.
It's like a new tool. It opens up new horizons.
Yeah, just like the piano was a new tool.
Yeah.
You know, just like the tempered scale was a tool. I mean, way back in the day, if you were in one village, you used one tuning, and another person in another village used another tuning, and you wouldn't know that you were different tunings until you guys got together and started to play with each other. So the idea that there was a tempered math that we could use, 440, 432, whatever you choose. I use 440. That was one of those things that was like, oh, that's going to make music sound horrible
Yeah.
because everybody's going to play the same thing now. And that's kind of how popular music gets looked at. Like, everything is the same.
Sure.
But no, it isn't.
Yeah.
Once you really, really look under the hood.
In classical music, like orchestras, there's an arms race with tunings because they keep kind of notching it up. So it's like, oh, we'll do 4/4-1.
Yeah.
And then, oh no, we'll do 4/4-2. Because
Yeah.
when the tune's a little higher, it sounds a little brighter. It kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
changes the sonics of the whole
Yeah,
thing.
that harmonic information.
So you
because
find that it kind of creeps up a little
the
bit.
upper harmonics are moving faster. So if you go up one pitch here, the harmonic above is going up 2. The harmonic above that is going up 4, so forth and so on. So
Yeah.
that's why it's getting brighter.
Yeah. This has been a great talk. I know that some of you all might need to run to class. So we'll do a couple questions if you have the
Oh,
time.
yeah,
I don't know
yeah,
if you're running
sure.
to class too. We'll do a couple questions. But if you got to go, thank you so much for
Yeah,
coming.
thank you, everyone.
And
Really
let's hear it for
appreciate it.
Prince Charles Alexander, y'all. So if you have my book, please don't walk out the door with it. Still, I have a lot to digest from that. Man, we could talk about so many things. This has been great.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any questions? Does anyone want to if you have a question, throw up your hand. We'll get you a microphone so we can get it on the recording. Thank you, Leah.
Awesome.
Hello.
Hey,
Thank you so much for your time. This is incredible.
anytime.
I have a class, but I really wanted to get your input on this. We were speaking briefly about like copyright and whatnot, in terms of like sampling or even using a live band to get past that. I guess if you can go a little bit more in depth on like the intricacies of that, and as like a creative, maybe you're not really like as apt to like composing, but you can definitely see how certain like chunks of a song can be, reshaped or repurposed. When is that appropriate, and like how do you make it appropriate?
That's a great question. And to tell the truth, copyright law is not black and white, it's gray. It really depends upon who is the one that has done the copying, who they've copied from, and then the interpretation by the courts once you bring a case forward. In this generation of potential copyright violations, let's look at sampling like cameras. So, 100 years ago, if I wanted to have a picture of you in my house, I would hire somebody to come and paint a picture. And then along comes these people with this thing where we actually get the picture of you immediately. So somebody got put out of work, and somebody was probably really, really angry about that. So in many ways, sampling is taking somebody else's intellectual property and repurposing it. But as there's a video called Copyright Criminals, if I have on vinyl, right, and that's on my vinyl, and then I do this with it, do I have to pay you for if I did for it, So this idea that what you thought of, I can now repurpose it. I take your picture and I recolor it, and let's say you're Marilyn Monroe, and I take a picture of Marilyn Monroe. She spent years developing her persona, but now I'm Andy Warhol, and I recolor it. I make her eyes blue and her eyes green and her eyes red and do all these kind of stuff, and I sell it to the world. Who owns it, me or Marilyn Monroe? So copyright violation is not really a black and white thing. It's kind of grayish. Now, how is that used in modern creativity? Some of the wealthier people in our industry use it kind of as a badge. Like, I can use anybody's song I want because I just give them a couple of $100,000 and I can sample them. If you're not Drake or if you're not Puffy, you can sample too. Just be prepared to give the original songwriter their credit. The better way is to actually speak to them first and get the permission and maybe even have to pay them some money. If you don't want to work like that, it's not all is lost. Do the sample, give them credit. If you never sell a record, nobody cared. If you start to sell a whole lot of records, somebody's going to care. They're going to call you up, and they're going to say, cease and desist, or where's my money? And hopefully you've sold enough units where you got a lot of money, you can just pay them. So theoretically, I wouldn't have a fear of sampling if you want to get into the creative world of sampling. It is, we haven't caught up with sampling with our copyright legislation. That's really the problem, because our last variation of copyright law was in 1976. That's 4 years before the drum machine. So don't be afraid to sample if you want to sample. Move forward with it. If it blows you up and somebody wants to sue you, hopefully it's somebody that's got a whole lot of money and they get in the newspaper and New York Times says, oh, you just sampled my record. Next thing you know, you'll be a producer that's sought after. That's what happened to Danger Mouse. Danger Mouse did an album called The Gray Album, where he sampled the Beatles, the White Album, and Jay-Z's Black Album, and he created a Gray Album. He won Producer of the Year 2 years running. So, yeah, copyright law is something I wouldn't be afraid of. It is what it is, and if somebody really wants to sue you, like Marvin Gaye's sister should not have won that case against Blurred Lines. They didn't sample anything. All they did was do kind of like an emulation of, not even an interpolation.
That was the other part of my question.
There's no way that they should have lost that case. They lost that case because they put some sheet music in front of Pharrell, and he couldn't read the sheet music. So he kind of looked stupid.
And
He should have come to Berklee.
But I also think that like there's a narrative there too, right? And when you're in front of a jury, they're just like regular folks. They don't know. They don't understand.
If it was me, Pharrell would have won the case.
Yeah.
But a regular person's like, this kind of sounds like Marvin Gaye's record to me, you know? And so, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Copyright law is a little bit gray.
Okay. Cool.
I mean,
Great
I would also just suggest too is like you can sample yourself, like you can resample, right?
Yeah.
Or you can sample your friends, or you can do what some artists have been doing, where they're going back to the live band model,
And
they
then printing
record,
their own vinyl.
right? And then chopping that up and moving that around and doing all that kind of stuff.
And that's like you can't really, they
Wu-Tang
can't really
Clan
touch
did
it.
that on one of their recent records. They got like the top band in New York
Yeah.
Well, I don't know that
to do that.
I don't know that you can't touch it because, do you know what a patent troll is? A patent troll is somebody that takes out patents on all kinds of stuff that's never been invented before, but they've got enough of a design to present it to the patent office, and then they get a patent. And then you come along and actually invent the thing that kind of sort of looks like their patent. Next thing you know, you get a call. That's my stuff. Any song. I don't care if it came from the deep depths of your brain. Any song can get attacked.
Yeah.
And that's true. So don't be fearful. Don't be fearful. There's only 12 notes. At the end of the day.
Thank you so much.
Great question. Great question.
I also, I'm taking a class with your daughter, and she's like.
Oh, with
incredible.
Katrina?
Yeah. She's so great.
My daughter is a math teacher here at Berklee.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
She teaches in liberal arts.
Hi, Charles. Thanks for being here. When we were looking at the pictures of the drum machines, there was a button on one of them that was, it was like a human randomness element to it, where it's not exactly down to the metronome. So I can sort of conceive kind of how you're talking about swing, how you would divide it up and kind of change. But where does the randomness?
This manual thing, the
Technology come
autofill
in.
thing, maybe?
No, it was the first drum machine.
The Lindrum?
Yeah.
This is not a great picture of it, but yeah, it might. I
Maybe it
can't
wasn't
remember that.
Oh, yeah. It says human rhythm. Yeah. Human rhythm feel made
Oh, that's
possible.
the swing, right?
Yeah, what it does is it changes which instrument will actually get the delay. So there's the kick, there's the snare, there's the hi-hat, there's the percussion. And so it's not going to give you any more increments, but it says, okay, so with this random setting, we'll shift the delay a little bit, we'll shift the snare a little bit later, but leave the kick here, and then we'll shift the hi-hat a little bit earlier. And so it's changing which one of the instruments will actually get the slight move away from the quantized value. And so then that feels more human. So like if you look at Funky Drummer under the microscope, and I think it's in the book, I actually look at Funky Drummer and do an analysis of where it's at. The first snare is about this late. The second snare is about that late. And literally that's the idea of randomization. And then, looking at the hi-hats, the hi-hat might be slightly early. So basically which instrument is getting the delay is what that button is doing.
I see. Thank you. And if you don't mind answering one more question. You mentioned you don't like Rapper's Delight.
Not really.
Yeah. So when you first heard it, did you like it? And
No.
no, you never. So
No, I thought it was silly. I thought it was three guys talking
little campy.
on a microphone and on top of a very, very successful beat. And I thought the whole idea was just going to go away in a matter of weeks. And here we are 40 years later.
you still don't like it?
It has value. It has value. When I'm at the picnic and we're eating our hot dogs and our chips, that's the jam. That's the jam you want. It's like, yeah, take me back to those days. And that is the thing that I was trying to relate to when I was doing my funk music. So it took me a while to really, I shouldn't say I don't like it. It took me a while to really, really understand its value. And then once I understood its value, I was like, well, this is good stuff. This works. It's got a lot of those things that connect to audiences. And ultimately, at the end of the day, whether I'm playing jazz, whether I'm playing hip-hop, whether I'm playing R&B, I really want to connect with audiences. That's why I got into music. So I have everything to learn from that song because of its ability to connect.
I see. Thank you.
Let's pass the mic over here if you don't mind. Thank you.
Thank you for doing this. Just a follow-up to that, what was maybe the hip-hop track that originally made you be like, not, because obviously you recognize that the crowds and
Right.
this was popular, but
Right.
for you, what like clicked for you and was like, okay, I like this?
I love that question. It was The Warning by Notorious B.I.G.
Okay.
Because I was working on The Warning. And who the heck is this paging me at 5:46 in the morning, crack of dawn, and now I'm yawning, wipe the cold out my eye, see who's this paging me and why. It's my brother Pop from the barbershop, told me about the intricate plot. A brothers want to stick me like fly paper, neighbor. Hold on, love, be still, reveal the caper. Remember them brothers from the hill that grew up, you know? And I was thinking to myself, well, I wasn't thinking anything. I was just making sure that the vocal was recorded well and that the EQ was good and the compression was good. And then I was going home with my assistant engineer. I was driving him, and he was 15 years old. And he said to me, hey, yo, Pops, are you listening to what he's saying? I was like, not really. He said, you got to check out what he's saying. Check it out. I was like, yeah, whatever. And he put the cassette in, and I wasn't in front of the console, so I wasn't being analytical. And I start, I'm driving, I'm listening, and man, heard about the Rolexes and the Lexus, and I'm like, oh, now I get it. This is Fats Waller. This is Billie Holiday. This is my culture, my time. This is a reflection of, you can give me anything. You can give me tap shoes. You can give me a tambourine. I'm going to create communication. Joyous communication. That was it. And that was around 1995. Yeah. And then I was like, okay, I'm hooked.
And then just a second follow-up. Is there any critique maybe you've had over, so I grew up in the 90s, so is it like more lyrical focused and like much more clearer vocals? Mm-hmm. Is there any kind of critiques of hip hop that you've had over the years? Like, I know it may be derogatorily called like mumble rap now, but is there anything, or are you just there for it and like down to like?
I'm theoretically I'm there for it.
Regardless of where it goes.
I can't always process it, in my heart of hearts, but theoretically I'm there for it because it's the job of every generation to break the mold of the previous generation. If any generation doesn't break the mold of the previous generation, guess what? They're not doing their job. They're being lazy. So mumble rap makes sense to me. Auto-tune made sense to me. Any Kendrick Lamar makes sense to me. Jack Harlow even makes sense to me. Because the language has to continue to push forward. Right now, the innovations are up in the lyrical space. There was a while, which is what I wrote about, where the innovations were in the instrumental space, and the language was making some moves, went from end rhymes to multi-syllable rhymes, percussion, concussion, reduction, explosion, erosion, those are the multi-syllables instead of beat, street, heat, neat. So multi-syllable rhymes, over the bar line rhymes, rhymes inside rhymes, and so all of this stuff has been evolving over a while. And Kendrick Lamar and Eminem are probably at the cusp of all of that, really, really doing that well. Where we're going, I don't know, but wherever we go, I want to be open enough to kind of receive it and understand why it is what it is. And it won't be us. It's going to be somebody who's 17, 16, 15 years old that figures that out. Great stuff.
And we didn't really get into this, but like you talk about a bit in the book where like the regional influence really kind of shifts over time, right?
Yeah.
From the East Coast to the West Coast.
Yeah.
I would say now, like the South.
Oh, it's all about the South. It's been
And-
about the South since the turn of the century.
And I think that has sort of shifted the sound. Because I think that everyone is now emulating that sound.
Yeah, there's a few artists that will still do East Coast, like Jay-Z still got like an East Coast vibe, you know. We
King
call
of New York
boom-
City.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, that's his thing. He wants to do New York and do boom bap. And we go boom, bap, boom, bap,
Yeah.
boom, bap, you know. Then you go to the West Coast, boom, 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 boom. They slow things down from 100 beats per minute to about 90 beats per minute. And then you go down to the South where there's like a polyrhythmic feel. Boom, where there's and all that crazy stuff. Which actually is like 80. So we went from 100 in the East Coast to 90 on the West Coast down to 80, and then all the subdivisions around 80.
Right.
So 80 and 160 is two ways that I could program my DAW.
Right.
So some of my things are moving at 160 and some of them are moving at 80.
Right.
And then if I go from 160 to 158, now I'm at 89. If I go from 80 to 81, 82, so I'm either going 80 up to 160 or 160 down to 80 when I'm doing trap music. It
Right.
really depends on how I want to set my sequencer up. And now even within the Southern sound, because remember, hip hop started in New York. The home of hip hop now is Atlanta.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that hip hop is Southern sounding now.
Yeah.
And New Orleans and Miami and Houston and Atlanta all participate in the growth of the current sound, which has already been morphing. You
Yeah.
know, you got trap, you got crunk, you have I'm trying to think of right now off the top of my head, bounce out of New Orleans. So you got bounce like Big Frida. Big Frida's on Beyonce's newest record. That's
Oh,
bounce.
really?
You got crunk. You got trap. You have chopped and screwed out of Houston. All of these variants and subgenres within hip hop are speaking to even smaller and smaller regional variations as we move forward. And simultaneously, pop music and the Hot 100 are starting to grab bits of that too. And in many ways, I'm starting to hear a little bit of a diffusion where I can't tell
Right.
is this a hip hop record or a pop record
Yeah.
or a country record. What's the name of that song? Bad Habit. Bad Habit is on the country chart, the Hot 100, and the hip hop chart. I'm like, oh, okay. And now I think about it, Lil Nas X's Old Town Road had that little country vibe too,
Yeah,
right?
Sure. Yeah.
So now it's like, okay. And I remember when we were like, oh man, if I just had a crossover hit, if I could just do my R&B or my hip hop, and the Hot 100 would love it too. And it seems like that's happening. But there's always going to be an underground. And I didn't really write much about the underground in my book because I was really looking at how most people got their hip hop. But the underground is where the new thing will come from. The underground is where the rebellions will occur. Like XXXTentacion came out and distorting everything, and you know that was a bit of a rebellion. But it didn't. I'm not really sure that stuck or really grabbed on. But that's where it's going to come from. It's going to come from those people who are not right in your face, but their underground movement is starting to influence other people in their regions, and then eventually there's going to be a producer or an artist that really gravitates towards that and says that that's great, as Beyonce did with Bounce,
Yeah.
with really, really picking up on
Yeah.
Big Frida's sound and trying to bring it to the world,
Yeah.
so much so that the whole album is based on that Bounce vibe
Yeah.
that Big Frida was really a master of for such a long time.
Yeah, and then you it's like, okay, so it's Beyonce. So is it a Southern record? Is it a West Coast record? Like, what is it?
Exactly.
It's just like an American record.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like American music at this point.
The closest I can, because you even got disco beats. I mean, most of it
Yeah.
is disco.
And house.
Disco becoming house. So yeah, the classification. I don't think that artists really vibe on the concept of classification anyway. That's what I'm saying. The book's called Hip Hop Production, but it could be called The Evolution of Production. For me, that's really what the book is.
And the thing is also transcending all over the world.
Yeah.
How the world interpreting
Yeah.
their own stuff.
Yeah. There's a module in my hip hop production class where we have to go and study hip hop in France, in Germany, in South America, hip hop in Africa, hip hop in Asia, and each student in Latin America. And so each student goes and gets a country, and they come in and report back to us, what has happened with hip hop in their country. And those are fascinating, because I actually produce people in French hip hop. I've done some German hip hop, I've done some Japanese hip hop, Malaysian hip hop, Brazilian hip hop. It's all over the world. Cool stuff. Any other questions?
Hi.
Go ahead. Hi.
Yeah, thank you for sharing the insights. And just because you were talking about like hip hop originally being like live band for the instrumental, but for now, like when you're producing or making a beat, do you ever do like minor tempo automations? And in what stage? If you do, would you do it? Like in what stage?
That's a good question, and no. 99.99% of hip hop is one tempo. Why there would be multi tempos or a tempo variation, like instead of 97.0, why would it be 97.6? That's because when you have a sample, you've got two ways that you can line that sample up. You can either conform the sample to a tempo, or you can conform the tempo to the sample. So when you see something that's 97.3 or 97.6 or 102.7, that producer has chosen to line the tempo up to the sample and just didn't want to change the sample in any way. Now to go from 102.7 to 102.3 to 102.1 to 101.9, that would only happen if I have a live performance and I'm tracking the live performance and I don't want to destroy the live performance. So if I'm working with Steve Jordan, and Steve Jordan is famous drummer and producer, and he really believes and knows that his time is really great, so I'm going to stick with his time. I won't modify him. I won't contract him. So if he's trying to do something hip-hop-like, I'll probably keep his fluctuating tempo, and then I can quantize everything to his fluctuating tempo once I've got the map. I quantize almost 100% of stuff. Well, let's pull that back, 98% of stuff. Because when you do on a synthesizer, you don't want to quantize that. So when I listen to like 24 Karat Magic by Bruno Mars and the monophonic synth is going, right? That, I would have to break that off of the performance, put it on another track, leave it unquantized, and then go in and quantize the rest of the performance. Great question.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you. I'm always like super curious from like a producer's standpoint. We talk about there always being like new sounds coming out, but then also like production can be so analytical and stuff. When do you find, or how do you end up going about the balance of like just trying to get the job done, making sure it's all analytically correct versus exploring new sounds and going around that?
That's a great question, because I guess the real answer is I do sound-alikes all the time. Like every week I'm probably trying to recreate something. Like I did Future and Thames's thing. I did As It Was by Harry Styles. That was what I was doing this semester. I did First Class by Jack Harlow. So I'm always looking at stuff. Now, how they produced it might not be exactly what I did. So as I'm looking at that synthesizer in Harry Styles' record and trying to replicate it, I'm like, I'm not quite there, but I've come up with a different sound. And so now I'm logging that sound into my bank, and as I move forward, remembering what I did, how I programmed it, and then whether the work that I'm working on in that moment can tolerate it. That's the tricky one. Because just because something sounded good in this record doesn't mean that it'll work in another record. And I might have to modify it, and that's when I start finding the new things. Like I'll be working on a song, and I'll be like, hey, guy, I heard this side chain going into this long keyboard pad, and it was going whoop, 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 and I know how to do it, but I don't know how they did it. I know how I can do it, and then mine doesn't sound like theirs, and I feel like I've bumped into something new. And those are the things that lead me. So most of what I do in music, because I've been around for too long, I've been around for too long for just to go off the top of my head. the top of my head, it'll devolve very quickly into some avant-garde stuff. So I have to kind of like look at things that make me feel a certain way, and then pull from those things, pull from that beat, pull from that sound, pull from that usage of the bass. Because right now we're not in melodic basses in hip hop. The bass is, and maybe the 808 will boom, 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 boom. You know, maybe that will be the melody that we'll get is maybe an 808 bass. But a lot of the basses in hip hop and in pop music are pretty much playing the tonic. And then what's down there playing the tonic? Is it a sine tone? Is it a triangle wave? These are the things I investigate.
Do you think that's because like it's difficult to mix together? Like the kick drum and the bass are difficult to mix together typically in any mix. Do you think that part of that is like, well, let's just make the kick the pitch, like the bass pitch, and then we don't have to mix them together because it's just one thing?
Another part of it is that our frequency response got broader as we got into the digital world. So if you're in the vinyl world, you can't really go much below 50 hertz. The groove of the vinyl will be too wide, and the needle will pop right out.
Yeah.
So that's why mastering engineers tried to cap us at 50 hertz. But once the digital world comes along, we can go down to 40, 30. We can hear all the way down to 20. There's a song called I Don't Care by Ed Sheeran. There's a 24.5 hertz pulse in that song. It's not an artifact from anything else. It's going. And it's not coming, it's not like, well, maybe it's maybe somebody bumped something,
kicked
right?
something and it got
and
copy
it's just,
pasted.
And it got copy and pasted as you printed the sample around, but it's not.
It could also be like sort of cinematic sounds, like film type sounds are making their ways into tracks.
I think they put it in there specifically because if you got dual 18s and two subwoofers, they wanted to feel that.
Yeah.
So in order for us to get that low, the lower bass notes and the low 808s, there's some records I remember from the 90s where they came together and one would be at 41 hertz and the other one would be 42 hertz, and you'd hear the at the bottom of the record. So producers over time started to understand that that was making the needle do crazy stuff. And then even if you're not dealing with vinyl, you can hear this little rubbing sound. It's like a little grating sound in the composition. So the best way to deal with that was just get rid of one of them and let only one of them do the bottom.
Do both.
Because
do the rhythm and do the tone.
And the tone.
Yeah.
Because of how low we can go now.
Yeah.
So having a bass and an 808 kick just wasn't going to work. So now we've got the 808 kicks doing the bass, and we've got this dry kind of 5K presence kick drum that will give us the solid hit of a kick, and the 808 can do all the rest of the stuff. But that's a great question about creativity. Where is creativity? I don't know where creativity is anymore because to me, I am not trying to push the boundaries too much because I've done that in my life and didn't make a lot of money from it. And every time I found out where the guardrails were and I painted within the guardrails elegantly, I got paid. So that's a great question. What is creativity?
Can I kind of piggyback off that too? We were talking about like regions. Say like somebody wants to pursue a career in like hip hop production. Would you say go to Atlanta now, or would you say stay where you're at and try to make that the new scene?
No, you got to go to Atlanta. Iggy Azalea is, I think, the first female in hip hop to reach #1.
No, I think Lauryn Hill. Didn't Lauryn Hill hit #1? That thing?
Not solo. I don't think so.
Oh, she was part of the.
It was either #1 or maybe the Grammy. Maybe Iggy Azalea was the first female female to win a Grammy.
Yeah.
In hip hop. Yeah, that might be what it was. So, if you track Iggy Azalea from Australia, where did she go? She went to LA. And you should see some of her early videos while she was hanging out in LA. There's one called, PUSSY. You should check it out because it's hardcore. I don't mean hardcore like she's not doing anything crazy in it, but you can see from that video she's immersed in the life. She's immersed in the region, immersed in the life. And then that moves you forward years later to Fancy becoming a very, very popular song.
I don't know that that could have happened without her being immersed. So I think that going to Atlanta, being in the scene, understanding what the language is, what the slangs are, what the flavor is pretty important to really be successful in the genre. And many producers have done that that are not from Atlanta. You know, they've relocated and started their career off once they're there. As much as the internet opens us up so that we don't have to be anywhere, I still think there needs to be a jump start moment or a Kickstarter moment for almost all of us. And if you can't do it from your computer, then maybe go to the city where that stuff is being done and try to accelerate it like that.
Thank you so much.
Great question. Awesome stuff.
I got one last thing for you. This is something I was thinking about, because you were talking about like being in the studio and working. Like, what were those sessions like? I remember reading about like when Michael Jackson was in the studio with Bruce Swedian. You know, they'd be like there like 2-3 days, no sleep, just going at it. You know, Quincy Jones obviously producing. Like, was it like that?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, by the time I was working with Bad Boy, I was older. Let me see. Bad Boy started around 90. 90. Yeah, so I was old. I was about in my 30s, my early 30s.
Mm-hmm.
So I always went home, even if it was 2 hours. I went home. So a typical day would be 10 a.m. call. We want to start working at 10 a.m. You know when everybody would show up? 2 p.m., 4 p.m., 6 p.m. So I finally started getting it and really understanding what the real deal was. So the average day really began around 2 p.m. at the earliest, 6 p.m. at the latest. And then we go to like 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m.
Yeah.
And then the 10 a.m. call would come. So 4 hours later, I'd be back at the studio.
Because you had to be there at 10.
Well, yeah, and there were lots of things I could do. You know, tightening up samples, making sure that the rhythms, if they were going to fluctuate or not, you know, listening to EQ, because we didn't have Pro Tools. So Pro Tools, you can just open it up, you could have tweaked the EQ 4 days ago, and that same EQ comes up.
Right.
But for us, it was tape, put the tape on the reel, bring it up on the console, and now get it back to the last time we heard it. So we had Total Recall, where we could go in and set all the EQs the same. We had to recall the outboard gear, recall the patch bays and all that. So that 10 a.m. call was like, okay, they want to come in at 6 o'clock and work on the warning. I've got to make sure that the warning is up and sounds like something that they want to listen to and rap over in order to do that correctly.
That's basically the board, right?
Yeah, that looks like an SSL console. Yeah, that's a J console. You can tell by that middle screen right there. It's either a J or a K. And that looks like it's about 48 modules. There's 24 over there and 24 over there. And literally the fader levels, the EQs, the sends, all of that could be replicated on that computer screen. And you'd go from one module, and it would show you these little readouts, and you could match it, because you had to do it manually. It wasn't like hit a button and it automatically comes back. It was like, go to this one, match it, boom. Let's go to this one, match it, boom. And so it would take about half an hour to maybe.
Saved it, but you still had to.
You still had to do it manually. So it could take 30 minutes to 45 minutes to recall a song. And then if the artist wanted to do multiple songs, you had to be able to do that quickly. You had to go in, do the recall, work on the song, and then pull it down, put the next one up, and work on that one. So if there were 3 or 4 songs that we were doing in a day, there would literally be these 1 hour gaps where there would be let's recall it. Now with Pro Tools, it's like, open it up, hey, work on that one, open it up, work on that one, hey, open up, work on that one.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
The downside to that is you work on that one 22 times.
Yeah, and you don't know where to stop.
Yeah.
I have a good meter of where to stop.
Yeah.
Here's the meter of where to stop in your record. Listen to Bad Guy by Billie Eilish.
Mm.
Listen to the first verse. If you got more than that, you got too much. That's where you stop. And drums, bass, vocal. All that guitar stuff, all that keyboard stuff, it's cute, it's comfortable, it works. Did you really need it? And these are the questions that I always ask myself as a producer when I'm trying to put that next synthesizer in. Is that really, really necessary? Do I really need that synthesizer? And then Bad Guy came out and I was like, nope, don't. Don't need it at all.
Maybe you need it a little bit later.
Yeah, later. Let's put it later in the song.
That next level.
And so now we have a different kind of an arc, a different storytelling arc with the musical instruments. Where before the string orchestra would begin the song and then the horns would come in and all of that, Earth, Wind, and Fire records, where you've got horns and you've got strings and you've got the rhythm section. We have a different arc, and it's a language. Like the first time I heard John Coltrane play bebop, and Lenny White always gets mad at me when I great drummer. I was like, it sounded like because I didn't know. That's what it sounded like to me. And then you start to study and you start to realize that there's 2-5-1 progressions going along in the composition. And you realize that there's, modal scales, Dorian, Lydian, Phrygian, and all this kind of stuff. And then when you listen to Coltrane, you hear, and you're like, oh, okay. But if you don't study the language, it just sounds like. And hip hop, I think, is the same. If you don't study it, it just sounds like a bunch of people auto-tuning and drum machining with gibberish lyrics that make no sense.
And that's where the sound alikes come in.
Yeah.
Because if you make the sound alike, you learn what's really
you
there.
learn so much. Oh, you have a healthy respect for the craft. When I made my early records, I did some raps. Because I was kind of hedging my bets. Even though the Rapper's Life was successful and I didn't think it was all of that, I was still hedging my bets that maybe this thing might blow up. So one of my early records on my first album is Tight Jeans. Let me see, how does it go? Wow, I forgot that song. Prince Charles, the case from 922. I'm looking for a girl that's just like you. Skin tight jeans, fitting just right. Let's party, girl, to the early light. I'll rap to you, I'll rap to your friends, and take you both home when the party ends. Those jeans you're wearing are out of sight, but you can't sit down because it's fitting too tight. That was one of my first raps, right? And that's on this. and I was hedging my bets that this might be the thing, but I realized that I wasn't a rapper.
Right.
So I had to really, really try to figure out what was going on. And I forgot where I was going with that. But the
sound alikes.
The sound alikes. So now, when my students do sound alikes, they realize how difficult it is. And I realized it when I did that song, when I just did Tight Jeans, and I did a reunion concert. And I couldn't remember all those words. It's just so many words. So literally, on the stage, if you looked on the stage, I had all of the raps on the stage. And I've got friends who are rappers that this stuff is just in their heads. Hundreds of songs. I got a friend right now, he's got 300 published songs. He's one of the French rappers. And when we do a show, he goes song after song after song after song. It's just coming off the top of his head. That's a skill set. That's like a bebopper that knows lots and lots of phrases that then pulls from each one of these phrases as they're improvising over the chord structure in the composition. I don't think it's any different. I think they're using the same parts of the brain in order to do that. It's hard. It's hard. And you realize that when you do the sound alikes.
It's like shedding.
Yep, you gotta shed.
Yep.
Gotta shed.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming today. Thank you.
If anybody's in MP&E, make sure you take or M-Tech actually. You don't have to be an MP&E to take the hip hop production class. If you're in any M-Tech, EPD, CWP, MP&E, and even some of the people in pro music have actually solicited me to get into that class. So if you're interested and want to get more of this information fleshed out, maybe I'll see you in class. Thanks everyone, appreciate it. Thank you.